Hey everyone, it is Matt Aguito back again with Sergeant Clyde Boatwright, Vice President of the Fraternal Order of Police for the state of Maryland. And you guys are now here for a civil moment. So this is something that I try to do where we go just a tad bit deeper into specific aspects of conversations I may have had in the past, and or maybe just a topic that doesn't involve like a long conversation, but we want to be able to kind of drill in and focus on it. And so there's a couple of areas I want to talk to Sergeant Boatwright about this evening, and I'm just thankful for him to join again, man. Sergeant Boatwright, thank you again for coming back after the last conversation. So obviously I probably didn't beat you up too bad on there, did I?
No, you did. It was good. I got a lot of positive feedback from my friends and family who watched it, and a lot of coworkers watched it. It's funny. I was getting text messages from coworkers as we were live, and they were saying, "Say this, say that," and I really just get to actually dig deeper into a lot of those conversations because I didn't have my phone glued to my hand during our conversation. But I did get a lot of positive feedback. And I'm glad that we had a good, courageous conversation because that's the way we can heal as a community.
Yeah, I agree with you, man. I agree with you. So there was about 2 or 3 areas I thought it would be good for us to kind of chop it up. And for those who are watching, I'm going to break this up into 3 videos for you all to watch. But resisting arrest is something I'm really curious about because of my perspective on what that may look like. And again, I think it's really good to kind of hear from a cop's perspective of what that looks like because, some of the tragedies that's occurred in the last X amount of years, that has always been kind of an argument from some sides. It's like, well, stop resisting arrest. Well, we're like, well, why are you so aggressive, right? That kind of feel. The other piece is, trying to understand just probably a tad bit more around the whole, police reform aspect, maybe a little bit there. And then the last piece is just, this is something you brought up to me actually in conversation, separate from the last conversation we just chatting on our phone, is just like the George Floyd incident versus the Rayshard Brooks incident, right? And what that meant to you from a cop's perspective. So hopefully we'll be able to jump right on in to these areas. And I want to start with resisting arrest, and I'll just lay it up. So, a lot of times in these arguments, people are like, yo, you got to just comply with the cops, which I totally agree with, comply with the police officers, and they tell you to do something, and or you hear some posts, you hear some things, you see some posts that's like, yo, like, he shouldn't have resisted, and that's not like trying to say that's why the person may have deserved to die, but at the same time it's almost like saying it's the reason why they deserve to die. What I don't understand is like, when you see somebody putting you in cuffs and the arms being bent a certain way and so on and so forth, like our bodies can tense up, all right, we can kind of feel like we're resisting. I don't know if I'm saying what I'm saying clearly, but you feel what I mean? Like, what is resisting arrest to a cop? Because I think for us civilians, it sounds simple, but maybe in those incidences, is it overblown? Is it not overblown? Like, you know what I'm saying?
So the way police officers are trained, it's to handle different types of arrests in different escalated ways. Meaning, there's a simple arrest. Let's just say, there's an encounter where the 2 people are on the street. The officer and the person that he's trying to take into custody are on the street. They have a conversation. Evidence is presented to the police officer where he has to make an arrest. And he has probable cause to make an arrest. There's a difference, and a lot of people don't understand the difference between a reasonable suspicion and probable cause. Once the police officer has probable cause, a reasonable suspicion is just merely a hunch. But that's also supported by the expertise of the police officer, or just based on physical evidence that he sees. Mm-hmm. But when you get into the fact of probable cause, when the officer has a set of facts or circumstances that will lead a reasonable and prudent police officer to believe that a crime has been committed, once you have that, an officer makes a determination that he has to make an arrest. If he gives a direct order for the person to place their hands behind their back, once in the state of Maryland, in order to have an arrest, you have to have you have the authority to make the arrest, which is a police officer. You also have to have the person in custody. And so, mm-hmm. and you also have to have that set of probable cause. So the minute that you affect the arrest and you go to physically restrain someone, just the mere pulling away is considered in most states as resisting arrest.
Can I
Um,
can I ask
sure.
you a question? So like, and I don't think anything you said, I'm not going to disagree with anything. That all makes sense to me. Um, if if there's any pain involved, how do you are you able to determine that? I'm just trying to
So
understand like your perspective, like, you know.
so that comes from the communication.
Okay,
That comes from the communication between the police officer and the person that he's trying to take into custody. He
okay.
say, sir, I need you to turn around, put your hands behind your back, you're under arrest. Once he says that, once he says that, and the person says, well, nah, once he says anything or does anything outside of complying with that order, he is now, quote unquote, whether physically resisting or passively resisting, like, no, I don't want to do, you can't do that. That's not the place to do that. If you have a discrepancy on why the police officer is making an arrest based off of his probable cause, then that's where you fight that battle in court. You don't fight it on the street. So even if you disagree, you have to accept the arrest. Even, and if it's wrong, then the police department will pay a lot of money in lawsuit for a wrongful arrest. So the minute that that person starts to not comply with the order given to him by the police officer, who has a duty to bring that person into custody before a judge or magistrate, he has a duty to do that. He has to enforce the law. He's sworn to protect and serve. That is what he is being paid to do. And in some jurisdictions, not a lot of money, but he's been paid to enforce the law. The minute that you have this pulling away or this putting your hands up, no, don't touch me, don't, when you start to see those kind of things, that is considered resisting arrest.
So that makes sense. Tell me if you could help me understand something. Then everything you said, I get it. Flip it to the cops mentality. How do cops feel? And I don't want to say good and bad. I'll probably say like aggressive, not aggressive. I don't know, like, because there's going to be different cops' responses, right, to any one of these things. Like, how do cops feel when that happens? Like,
so you have to have, I said this on the last interview that we had. On day one, the minute that you get into training, day one of physical training, they always tell you, you bring a gun to every situation that you go to. So there's a gun involved. So be mindful of that. Don't go running up, putting your hands on people. Don't, just don't be reckless with what you're doing, because if you're incapacitated, that gun can be taken from you and will be used against you. So be smart. A lot of police officers I've seen don't necessarily use all of their tools. Most police officers do use their tools. The minute you tell someone that they're under arrest and they resist you, one of the best tools that you have is your departmental radio. You could call, hey, I have a person that is resisting arrest. I mean, now with the evolution of body cameras, you can now see that resisting being recorded, digitally recorded by a camera. But you can, one of the tools when I first started was just put it on the radio. Hey, I'm at, Main Street, 125 Main Street. I have a person that's resisting arrest. I need some additional help. Let the people, let there's strength in numbers. Let more additional officers come to help you. Because the minute you're fighting, this is another thing that I learned early in my career. If you're fighting, you're losing. Meaning, don't get into a fight. Don't physically get into a fight. We're not here to fight.
How do you guys stop that? Like, if you're being attacked is one thing, but
Correct.
like, so if you are, when they say don't get into a fight, again, we know now everybody's probably following the same things, but this is just your perspective. Should a cop keep trying to get with the compliance?
No.
Or is it like, are they just back off and then like?
No. So again, use your tools. The minute that you try to take someone into custody, use your tools, use your voice command. Most officers take something called verbal judo. How to, interact with someone that's being passive aggressive. They use defense tactics. You can use different restraints, such as, the inside wrist takedown to grab somebody, and, it's all like hand-to-hand combat stuff. But again, don't randomly just put your hands on somebody when you don't know their physical capabilities or you know that your capabilities are limited. That does not mean, and it has never been taught about to me, or I'm quite sure to any other police officer, the 350,000 cops in this nation, nobody has ever taught you if you can't arrest somebody to just shoot them. It don't work that way. That's not a realistic thing. And deadly force should only be introduced in any situation or any encounter with a police officer when your life or the life of someone else is in serious, if there's a threat of seriously bodily harm or danger. That's the only time deadly force should be introduced. You don't shoot somebody running away. You don't shoot somebody, that's resisting you and that does not want to go to jail. You don't shoot that person. It's your job to catch them, chase them, and catch them.
And the perspective I think a lot of people have, some say it's warranted, some say it's not, right? Some say the stats disprove it, some say the stats would, is, cops are like shoot first, ask questions later, right? I'd rather be tried before 12 rather than carried by 6.
Well, so that
you get what I mean? Like I'm raising that not to cause static, but more of like this is what's being said. So let's talk about it.
Yeah. So I think that's important. When you hear the statement, I'd rather be tried by 12 than carried by 6, and I look at that statement. I would rather go before a judge, a jury of my peers that are citizens that think like me, logically, that are regular tax-paying citizens, than be carried by pallbearers because that person did something physically to harm me. That's what that statement means. It doesn't necessarily mean, I'd rather just go ahead and shoot him and kill him. Just to rather allow them to get away.
Yeah. Well, some would say that statement is fuel for justification for police activity that has been negative, right? Meaning, police brutality, killings, and so on and so forth. So the way you brought it up, I understand it from a logical standpoint. You're saying, hey, look, I'm not trying to get killed. I would rather be in court. But you're not saying it from a fueling perspective. You're saying it as more of like a reactive kind of, like, not reactive. It's probably not the right way to say it, but you're just saying it's not what should be
reasoning. It's a reasoning, a mental reasoning.
It's a mental reasoning. But then some would think that fuels the reason why cops are aggressive.
So let's dig into that. When I first started off, I talked about how you address different types of arrest, whether it's, you and the citizen out on the street, or you get called to a situation where someone's actively doing something. Somebody's actively armed with a knife. They're actively armed with a baseball bat. They're actively armed with a firearm. That is a felony arrest situation. So you don't approach a felony arrest, at least in my state, you don't approach a felony arrest with the person in a standing position. You give them orders to get down on their knees. You give them orders to put their hands on top of their heads. You give them orders to turn their face away from you. You give them different orders in order to control the scenario, because also you have to look at the situation. If that person is actively engaging in someone, whether it's stabbing or shooting someone, you're not going to give them the orders to stop. You're going to stop the threat. You're going to shoot to incapacitate and stop the threat. So you have to take that into consideration as a police officer approaching that type of situation. What is that person actively doing? Are they actively a threat against me, or more importantly, are they actively a threat against another person? And so from that standpoint, you approach this as a felony stop, and you tell that person, get on the ground, show me your hands, put your hands up, put the knife down, you give them those orders. And you once you give them those orders, you have to take into account a number of things. One, are they in their right frame of mind? Is this a mental situation? Is this but however, you also have to take into the consideration, you got to get this person in custody as quick as possible. Once they're in handcuffs, now you've got to render aid to the person that's injured. You got to make sure that you're not injured. And now you have 2 victims instead of 1, or multiple victims. So when you start looking at those types of scenarios on how police officers approach the arrest, and like I said, this is passive aggressive. With
Right.
my hands up, no, no, don't touch me. Don't put your hands on me. You're now resisting arrest. People don't view that as resisting arrest, but it actually is. Now, in most cases, police officers don't charge it. They don't. That's just another charge to add. But it doesn't. You can't have resisting arrest if you don't have a legitimate arrest to resist.
Right.
And
Right.
some people feel as though that they were innocent, but holding court in the street is not the place to hold court. Take it before a judge, have the charges dismissed, get you an attorney, and then if you're innocent. But if you're guilty, then the officer's doing what he's supposed to do.
I started visualizing Judge Dredd. You remember from Judge Dredd, the Sylvester Stallone movie?
Oh yeah, 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 yeah.
I was
That's a
like,
long
because you
time
remember
ago.
they, huh?
That's a long time ago for me.
But
I haven't seen that in a
yeah,
long.
but you remember the whole premise was they went out and they were actually the law and also the judge. Like right when they go out there, that was it. They were judges who can execute whatever they want. I think a lot of people have that perspective. I think I'll say for me, you just educated me pretty heavily on of the details. I mean, I was aware of it at a high level, but just some of the details which I really appreciate. So in this topic or in this area, kind of rounded it off a bit. How do we? Where are we wrong? There's two sides of wrong, right? Where are we wrong as civilians, people who don't really know. But I think you kind of touched on it a bit with us being undereducated in regards to the process. And then where are officers wrong where these have failed, or where this has failed? How do we resolve both sides? What are your thoughts on that?
So I think it's important to understand. I heard a judge and I had a unique perspective when I first started out. I was a deputy sheriff, so I worked primarily in the courtroom in Baltimore City, and I was a young, energetic guy, and I was assigned to a judge who had felony court, and he did all murder cases. And I remember the defense came up with this argument that their client did not know. And I remember the judge, Judge Schwait, I don't even know if he's still on the bench or not, but Judge Schwait said this. He said, ignorance of the law is one's own fault. And he said, your defense for your client that he didn't know is not an acceptable defense before the court. And so I thought about that. And then I had a scenario where at work, I didn't know something was a rule or something like that. I guess it was a uniform thing. And my supervisor said to me, well, if you didn't know, you should have known. And I'm like, wow. So when I think back to that, it all came full circle. That interaction with the judge as a young officer, a uniform violation with a supervisor, and I thought back to my first day in the police academy. And the first day, one of my classmates forgot something that was on a list of things to bring. And the first thing that we learned was it's no excuse. When he was asked, where's your binder? And, this person washed out and didn't even finish the academy. But, where's your binder that you were supposed to bring? Oh, I left it on the car. I didn't want to be late. Our whole class had to do push-ups. And then they asked him again, where's your binder? And then finally somebody said, there's no excuse, sir, to the instructor. There's no excuse. There's no excuse for why you did not know. And so I say that for my colleagues in law enforcement, you should know what is the correct escalation of use of force. You should know the proper way to use these techniques that you decide to use, whether it's using your voice, whether it's using your hands, whether it's using defensive strikes or kicks, whether or not you're using pepper spray, whether or not you're using an expandable baton, whether or not you're using a taser, or whether or not you're using a firearm. You should know that the expected level of force, the acceptable level of force necessary to effect the arrest. Period. Full stop. All right. For citizens, if they don't know, it's up to them to take, when I say them, it's up to a citizen to take the approach of, I may not know this fully, but I can't stand on something that I don't know is a fact. Meaning, if you're trying to make an arrest, you may not think what you did was wrong. However, the police officer is trying to make an arrest because he has probable cause, but you don't think that it's wrong, even though under the law, it's acceptable for that person to make that arrest under the law. Mm-hmm. And so, again, you have to, as a citizen, you will have to educate yourself on whether or not that's true or not. And then most times what happens is, and I'll give you a quick scenario. I know you want to wrap this up, but I had a scenario where I made an arrest of an adult male, and he just figured because of the police department that I worked for was not legitimate. Like, I couldn't talk to him as an adult because I work for the school system.
Right.
And I was like, what are you talking about? Anybody that has police on their patch can take your freedom. The reason you pulled over on the car stop was because I had red and blue lights. But then when you saw the police department that I worked for, you figured, oh, I could just get disrespectful and I don't have to follow the law. And then I find stuff in your car and I make the arrest, and you said, oh, this is what the guy said. He said, oh, I'm going to be rich. You just a school. you can't lock me up. I'm grown. And then when we pulled up to local central booking intake facility, he said, what we doing here? You can't get in here. This is only for the real police. And I said, you got on real handcuffs. You're about to get real charges, and you're going to the real jail. What he said to me was, oh, man, I wish I would have known that from the beginning. But he stood on the fact that he thought that he was correct and I was wrong. And, you know, things worked out. I see the guy on a regular basis now, and we laugh and joke about that. He'd be like, no, don't mess with them, man. They, you know, he cool, you know, but we had to have that interaction where he thought that he was right.
Well, I think, well, first off, that was a really good summary for both. I mean, to help understand your perspective, right, on that. I think for us, from a civilian standpoint, you know, we're constantly, especially as African Americans, we're constantly beating each other's heads as much as we possibly say, you know, can, like, hey, you know, don't argue, comply, just whatever they tell you to do it, and do it slow. There are some challenging things I think a lot of people are warning against, like, hey, make sure the body cam's on, ask the cop for a body cam, ask the cop for, you know, certain things. And it's funny because we talk, let's close on this one, and then I would like to jump into the George Floyd and Rashard Brooks piece. But when it comes to when people are questioning the cop during a compliance request, you get what I'm talking about. Like, if they tell you to do this, you don't have to do it. They tell you to do that, you don't have to do that. What do you think about that when you hear that? You know what I mean? Like, what is that? What does that mean?
I hear people that, you know, that always want to give this educated, I know the law type of.
And this video, sorry to cut you off, this video's from even retired cops that do that, or former cops that says, you know,
sure.
Okay, current cops, not even retired. I've seen one from a cop that's currently, you know.
And that, in that vein, I think it's important to understand attempting to hold court right there on the side of the road when having a police encounter is a no-win situation for anybody.
Okay.
Not for the police officer and not for the person that's being detained. You don't hold court there. You hold court in the courtroom in front of a judge. So we have to educate our community that we have to fight a different fight as opposed to an aggressive fight. What do I mean by that? The minute that you become aggressive and trying to stand up for yourself on the side of the road, it appears to be there's some sort of act of aggression against the officer or against whoever that you're like. If an officer pulls up and you got two people arguing and you're not mad at the police officer, you still mad at the guy across on the other side of the car, and you still pointing and vigorous across, and also like, chill out, man, I'm not talking to you yet, man, I'm so-and-so, man, leave me alone. When you're doing that, you're not focused on the police officer, and you know your rights, but you're mad at that other person.
Right.
So we got to get people to say, well, to be smart and say, all right, you know what? This is not the right place. You know what? You're right, officer. Okay. All right, officer. Now, well, where's your, see, this is what happens all the time. I'm gonna give you a quick example. When the officer pulls up to the scene, you'll start to see, where your body cam at? Man, call your sergeant, man. I ain't nobody want to talk to you. Put your sergeant, where the lieutenant? Man, I know the chief. Man, the mayor is my cousin, man. Oh, man, y'all just keep, man. All of that extracurricular activity is not going to change any fact of why the officer is there and why the officer is taking that action. Whether you know the chief, whether you went to high school with the mayor, whether the sheriff is your cousin, all of that stuff is all side noise. The officer is going to make a determination because he's given that duty to do so based on his authority, based on whatever, you know, the local municipality rules are. So doing all of that, I think it's a waste of time. I'm gonna be honest with you, because I don't pay any of that any mind. If I'm there to effect an arrest, that's what my goal is going to be, to effect the arrest. We're going to do everything we can within reason and not violate anyone's constitutional rights. We're going to make the arrest. However, the side noise about where your sergeant at, call your lieutenant, I know the chief. I don't care about any of that stuff. And
it's so hard. Yeah, I can definitely see that being distracting when you're trying to do something. Like if I'm working on something right now, someone's shoving a phone in my face, that's kind of hard because you're at your job and you're trying to do some work. And it's like, well, on the flip side, it's almost like as a civilian, it's warranted to do it because you're like, look, I need to be protected because I don't know when this cop's going to be tripping. Some of that may be media driven. Some of that may not be media driven, right? Because some of that is even personal experience driven, right? You know, like Rodney King.
So I would like to jump in right there.
Yeah.
It's important for the officer to de-escalate, but it's more important for the person with the camera to de-escalate. And let me tell you why. You have in your hand, the person on the camera have valuable evidence. That's valuable evidence. And if you're actively engaged in the scenario, why are you putting your hands on them? Man, why you putting this? You're taking away from something valuable, like that person saying, I can't breathe. Now you can't hear it because you got the phone over your face. Man, take your hands off his back.
So you're talking about from a witness's perspective, not the
witness's perspective. Yeah. The witness has valuable information. No, look, years ago, you know, people used to act funny about someone recording you, but the law says that there's no reasonable expectation of privacy on the street. So therefore, you can record the police all the hell you want, all day long. You can record the police all day long. And so with that being said, the officer has to act as though he knows that he's being recorded at all times. When he gets outside of that, then that's when, you know, they have gotten outside of doing what they were supposed to do.
I think this is a great segue for us to get into George Floyd versus Rayshard Brooks. So let's get ready to jump into that.